Good morning. Welcome to those of you that are here in Phoenix. We're always glad you're here. You're so sick of me saying that. I totally get that. But we have to say, because there are people new, and we really are seriously glad you're here. For those of you that watch us any way you found us, which is online, womensbiblestudy.com, apps, we have apps for your phone, Android, Apple, Windows. You can watch us on Roku, YouTube, iTunes podcasting. I can't remember what else, but anyway, you can find us anywhere. Women's Bible Study, and that's how you can find us. Our goal here is really so you can watch Bible study anytime, anywhere. You don't have to actually be here, so that's kind of the plan for that. Now, we're in the middle of a series called The Parables of Jesus, Life-Changing Stories. Thanks to Cheryl Lynn, our set is up. If you hadn't gotten here this morning, we would have been in deep trouble. So, but thank you for that. So what happened is that towards the end of the series, as you see, we have the middle. Life-Changing Stories, the middle. We're doing the beginning, the middle, and the end. Now, when we get to the end of the parables, it's really interesting because a lot of Jesus' parables at the end were about end times. So, what I want to do today for the first probably 10 minutes or so, I want to explain to you about an event that we have coming up here. Now, I'll put this flyer up here. Most of you have it here. Joel Richardson is going to come back. We are going to do a one-day, 6-session conference with him. It is going to be exhausting for him, and it's going to be a really, really important event for all of us. Now, the reason why we named it The Exciting End Times is because nobody really thinks the end times are very exciting. And no one's talking about it, no one's preaching about it. And I'm like, we got to change that because the world is changing fast, we know that, and we want to be prepared for what's coming down the pike. So, I want you to put on your calendar Wednesday, February 19th, and that's going to be this day. We will do a 9 to 11 in the morning. We'll let you go away for lunch. You come back at 1, from 1 to 3, then you go home for dinner, and then you come back from 6 to 8. I mean, that's how the day is going to go. Now, originally, we were going to do this into like a 2 or 3 day conference and bring in other speakers, but it just never worked. So this is the way we're doing it. So I want to tell that to you in advance. So for those of you that watch us online or however you found us and you want to be here, you need to take the day off. Some of you, your husbands will maybe want to take the day off. It's going to be a really, really important event. Now, I'll throw this out. The hardest part of videotaping these is if you're watching this video in March of 2020, it doesn't matter to you the next 10 minutes. So you can just fast forward it because the event's already gone. So anyway, we are in November of 2019, which is why we're putting this up to you now. Now, if you were not here for our Revelation series, Joel Richardson came in and helped us for 3 sessions, and he was beyond amazing. Like, he just is one of those guys that's just uber smart and just knows what he's talking about. And so what we're going to do is we're going to have him come back in, and the reason why is because, like I said, the world is changing really fast. And people are very, very afraid of what's going on out there. They're fearful of the elections. They're fearful of everything that's going on in the world. But here's what you and I need to know. If you're a follower of Jesus, you have nothing to be afraid of. You really don't. And the closer we get to Christ, the more we know him, the more we understand what's coming, then we're prepared for it and we're excited about it. We're not terrified of it. And the reason why we don't have to be afraid and be like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? Dusty came to me the other day and he said, Mom, someone told me that the world's going to end in 2028, and he gave me a reason why. And I said, it's not going to happen. And the reason why we know that is because the Bible tells us exactly how this world's going to end. It's no secret to us. The problem is no one wants to read their Bible to find that out. The Bible tells us how things are going to end. The Bible tells us which countries are going to be involved in the end. Like, it's just right there. Most of them are in the Middle East. And Joel really explains this. The Bible is Israel-centric. The entire Old Testament is about Israel. The nations surrounding Israel, which of course we know is Syria, Iran, Iraq, Turkey, Egypt, they're all going to have a part in the end time. So Joel's going to explain that to us. And then what we need to know is Jesus is coming back. And I don't know why no one's excited about that, but it's an exciting, exciting event. It's going to be, he'll reign in Jerusalem for 1,000 years. But before he comes back, there's going to be this 7-year period. And everyone knows it as the 7 years of tribulation. And it's going to be tough. But the problem is the Bible tells us we need to be prepared. But unfortunately, in America, churches are telling you that you're going to be raptured out of here before the 7 years. Now, I always tell people, if that happens, yay, I'm all for it. But I don't think that's true. And I think we'll have to go through at least up into the middle and a little bit past after that. Now, you can believe that or you're not, and I don't care. It doesn't matter. I'm not saying it's not a salvation issue. But if I'm right, and the Bible's right, because what I think it is, then we need to know what's coming so we don't walk away from our faith when things do get really tough. So that's why we're bringing Joel in here, so he can put kind of a bow around it, say, this is what's going to happen. These are the players in the end time. Now, I want Joel to come in and show us big picture, Genesis to Revelation. Like, what happened in Genesis, and why does the world have to end the way it does in Revelation? And we want him to talk about the rapture, because that's a really, really important event, and when this is going to happen. We're going to talk about the good news of Jesus returning, and that for us, if we know Christ, like, death is not the end for us. Like, we get new bodies. We get to come back and reign with him. Like, there's so many cool things that most people have no idea. For me, I can't wait. We get brand new bodies, and that's the best part. My dad is not doing very well, and he's now pretty much in a wheelchair most of the time. He can't walk. It's very difficult for him. And I just told him the other day, I said, Dad, your body was never made to live forever. Like, you're going to get a new body where you're not going to be aching all the time. That's a really, really exciting thing. So if you know nothing about Joel, I'm going to show you really quick what he's done. He writes books. He wrote the Islamic Antichrist, because most of the countries around are Muslim and it's growing, and so he believes that has a lot to do with end times. He wrote the Mideast Beast. He wrote When a Jew Rules the World. He wrote Mount Sinai. It's fascinating. Most people, if you go to Israel, they'll be like, oh, Mount Sinai is in Egypt. I don't think it is. I would think Joel's right on this. It's in Saudi Arabia, so it's worth looking into. Here's the deal with Joel. He not only writes, he produces films. He did Sheep Among Wolves. He just got back from Saudi Arabia. He's trying to get them to open up tourism there so people could see the real Mount Sinai. He works with underground churches in Iran. And on top of all that, he's a dad and a husband, and he's got a bunch of kids, and he's got a wife. So all that to say, he's really, really busy, so we're going to have him come in. Now, I'm going to show you a video so that you guys know, if you weren't here, you'll at least get kind of an idea of what he does. In the middle of this video, there's a video clip of something he put together, or someone put together, on Mystery Babylon, because Revelation talks about Mystery Babylon and who it could possibly be. And so we're going to play a couple clips from him, and then you'll kind of get an idea of who he is. So
let me begin actually with something that you just said. So just to understand this whole issue of the centrality of Islam in the end times. Okay, if you're a realtor, what is the most important thing? Location, location, location. If you're a student of the scriptures, what is the most important thing? Context, 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 right? So just a simple way to understand is this book, it is and always has been. What is the context of it? It is and has always been Jerusalem and Israel centric. That's the context. Everything unfolds there in Jerusalem and in Israel and in the Middle East. But what happens, particularly with Revelation, is when we open the Bible, it's just a very natural thing is we impose our worldview into the pages of what we read. So we read all about the end times and this evil end time dictator and these evil end time philosophies and ideologies, and we look at our world and we impose it in here rather than beginning with understanding the context. So all's I am essentially articulating is the fact that this book is about Jerusalem and Israel and the nations that surround Israel. That's the head of the spear. It's not to say the United States and the rest of the world is not relevant. It's just not central. This book is not primarily for Americans. And everyone goes, what? But the world revolves around us. Surely God's world must revolve around us too. And you're like, actually, that's not the context. So that's where we start. Now, if we were to die today as believers, the Bible says that our spirits would go to be with him. We would be in the presence of Jesus in heaven. But even those that are in heaven, according to the scriptures, are waiting for the day of the Lord and the resurrection of the body. So the good news is that the day is coming when all of those who are in Christ will actually be raised up out of the ground and we get new bodies. Now, not these bodies, not these sagging, aging, sick, tired bodies, glorified, immortal bodies. And the good news is that we get to eat.
My favorite thing.
We get to smell. And yet we don't, have to count calories. And most Christians, we look at this, heaven is open, we go, well, this is the picture of the return of Jesus. But here's the thing. All of this information is already thoroughly laid out throughout the Old Testament. The return of Jesus. And I'll probably surprise you here. You have multiple passages that commentators look at and they go, well, this is describing the Exodus. The problem is that it's using like flamboyant, poetic language because it says that God is marching before them with hands and feet. And we know God didn't really march before them as a man in anthropomorphic form during the Exodus. And then you have some courageous commentators that go, no, this is not the Exodus. It's using Exodus language, but it is messianic. It's Jesus. It's the Messiah. So the return of Jesus is portrayed throughout the Old Testament as the second Exodus. And he marches triumphantly and he leads his people as he's setting prisoners free, marching up to Zion, up through the desert. And we won't get into all the details of that. No, the good news is not just someday we die and go to heaven. The good news is the renewal of all things, the restoration of all things, the coming of the kingdom, the messianic kingdom. But we hardly ever talk about any of this in church. And I think we're shortchanging all of ourselves and we're shortchanging the world. Why are we telling the world, hey guys, you should, stop being an alcoholic. You should stop cheating. You should stop stealing. You should come join us. Why? Well, someday you don't go to hell. That's good, but we have so much more to offer. We have such a better message to steward, and I think we need to reclaim the full gospel as it was proclaimed throughout the prophets, throughout the Bible, by Jesus, by the apostles, right up until the final verses of Revelation, where he's sitting on the throne and he says, behold, I make all things new. That's really good news.
Yeah. He is super awesome. So you just need to make sure that you put that on your calendar and all that. Now, the reason I want you to understand, we're not doing this just so we can do a quick Bible study and for us. We're doing this to get this on video. Joel will be speaking all 6 sessions. I will not be up there with him. He's actually we're going to set the whole thing up to where he's teaching. The reason for it is because we want to get these 6 sessions on YouTube, on video, so that people can take this message, the 6-session series, and invite people into your homes. And do a small Bible study. Bring it to your small group. We have got to start preparing people because nobody else is. The churches are telling people that false things that we're going to just be out of here. And if we are, like I said, yay, but if we're not, no one knows what to do. And we need to be prepared and looking out, so that's what we're doing. Now, all that to say is this will be the most expensive event we've ever done. For those of you that know, this room, to rent this just for an hour here, is beyond expensive every week. I can't even tell you how much it is. We're having it for the entire day and night. So put that in your head. We've got video. David's going to have to pay for David's time to come in. We've got audio people that'll have to be here. We've got to give him a really good speaking fee because he is doing a lot to get here. So I want to just tell you that what we're doing with this event is we're going to make it a ticketed event. And the reason for it is because there's some people that can only make it the night sessions, and there's others that can only make it in the morning session. And we just have to have enough set up in here to where if everyone showed up at one session, we would have a seat. So there's a reason for that we're doing that. Now, for those of you that are here, you have an envelope in front of you, and it looks like this, and it's kind of cute. Here's the deal. On here it says a $50 suggested donation. Now, the event, the tickets are free. So I'm just going to tell you that right now. So there's some of you who see that $50, throw it and say, I'm never coming. Please don't do that. That's not what this is about. Tickets are free, but when you see that, I want you to know and remember how much this event's going to cost us. And so you girls are always really good about rising to the occasion. And hopefully if people are watching us online, they actually, send in donations for this or whatever. There's some of you that could write, quadruple that amount, and some people that maybe has $1. So the reason why we're doing envelopes is because we want you to stick something in there, whatever it is, and it doesn't have to be today and it doesn't have to be next week. The event's not till February. Hand it to Vicki. Vicki, raise your hand. Vicki will give you this. It's your ticket and your lanyard. So when you have this means you have a ticket to get into the event. So that's the plan. No one's going to see whether you donate nothing or $1 billion. So just so you know that. But that just is going to keep track of the people that are going to be here so we have space for them. But please know, we don't want anyone not to come. If you have no dollars, then just hand her the envelope and she'll give you. And you can also donate back here and then just tell them you donate back or whatever, doesn't matter. So anyway, Last thing, the reason why we want you to know this ahead of time too is because I think this would make a really good Christmas gift. Because Christmas is coming and you got to buy a present anyway. So maybe if you have those neighbors that you're like, they really need to understand about end times, you say, look, I bought you a ticket for this event. Wrap it up, give it to them. It's kind of a good idea. So that way they can come in, hear Joel, hear about end times, get saved. Yay! That's the whole point of this whole thing. All right, let's get on to the lesson. Last week I told you that I was I've been on this Butterfinger kick ever since Halloween. And so after I had the lesson here, every once in a while I get to go get a massage. So that was last week, like later on. So next to the massage place is a dollar store. So I ran in there because I knew after talking about Butterfingers that I needed to have one, okay? So I went in there and I bought not one, but a whole package of them. And so I'm getting ready for my massage, and so I'm eating the Butterfingers, and she walks in and she said, I said, I'm sorry, I probably smell like Butterfingers because I've been eating them. She goes, well, what would you like me to focus on today? And I said, well, I kind of have this muffin top right here. And I said, could you just like massage all the fat out of my muffin top? That would be what I would want you to do. And she goes, no, I'm sorry, I can't do that. And I started laughing because I thought, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, well, maybe if you quit eating Butterfingers, you wouldn't have fat on your waist. So maybe that would be a novel idea. Okay, we went to Israel, videotaped segment. We'll play that really quick now. It'll set up for the parable we're talking about today. We read the parable at the end. So here you go. Good morning. Welcome to our series, Life-Changing Stories. We're talking about the parables of Jesus. We are here in Israel doing some snippets here and there so you can see the land and we can try to help you see what it looked like when Jesus was actually here. For this particular parable, it was really hard to come up with an actual place because this is one of the most talked about, preached about, well-known parables that most people know of, and it's the one about the prodigal son. So we are here near Jericho at the Jordan River, and right across from us is Jordan. It turned now into a baptismal so people can come here and get baptized. But we want to talk about the prodigal son because this is also a place where the Israelites would have crossed over to get into the promised land across the Jordan. Now, the prodigal son story is all about a son who told his father, you know what, Dad, I don't want to wait for you to die. I want my portion of the wealth now. His dad gives to him. He goes to a foreign land. He squanders all the money, and then he comes back home a broken man seeking forgiveness and mercy and grace from his father. So we're trying to figure this out, and thinking of this parable reminded us of the Israelites in the Old Testament and the amazing grace and mercy that God had for these people who walked away from him over and over and over again. And yet he always just hung in there with them and loved them no matter how bad they were to him. And yet the lesson today reminds us that you and I can be just like that. We can walk away from God for a season, for many years, and he's always trying to woo us to come back to him. That's the heart of God. So I want to give you a little history really quick about the nation of Israel. We talk about Abraham all the time. But we want you to understand how it all plays out to today. Abraham, of course, had a son named Isaac. Isaac has Jacob. Jacob has 12 sons. 10 of the sons, they all had different baby mamas, which is never a good thing. But Jacob's wife, Rachel, is the one that was the love of his life. And they had a son named Joseph, which, of course, the older 10 despised. And Jacob was not shy about letting them know, like, you are my favorite son, Joseph. Through a series of events, the older 10 see Joseph, sell him to slave traders going to Egypt. They go home, they tell their dad, Joseph is dead, he got eaten by some animals. But in reality, God used this horrible event to get Joseph to Egypt, where 20 years later, he would become second in command to Pharaoh, and then he would eventually come face to face with his brothers and move the whole family to Egypt. So the Israelites now would move into Egypt. So for approximately 300 years after Joseph's death, his family, the Israelites, grew into this huge population of millions. Pharaoh gets nervous, makes them slaves, and Moses comes on the scene to get all these millions of people out of Egypt and bring them here to this land into Israel. So God sends Moses and goes to Egypt and unleashes the most amazing, miraculous miracles ever recorded in the Bible. Plague after plague, the Israelites could see miracles because the plagues would affect the Egyptians and not the Israelites. Hail, frogs, gnats, blood in the Nile. And then there was the parting of the Red Sea, where the Egyptians were coming after the Israelites. God parts the sea. The Israelites make it through. The water comes over and kills the Egyptians. So here's the point. God did so many amazing things for them. And after everything that God did for them, saved them from a life of slavery, gave them this land. This is what we see in Exodus 32. Now, when the people saw that Moses delayed coming down from the mountain, the people gathered together to Aaron and said, "Come, make us gods that shall go before us. For as for this Moses, the man who brought us out of the land of Egypt, we do not know what has become of him." And Aaron said to them, "Break off your golden earrings, which are in your ears of your wives, your sons, and your daughters, and bring them to me." So all the people broke off the golden earrings which were in their ears and brought them to Aaron. And he received the gold from their hand, and he fashioned it with an engraving tool, made a molded calf. Then they said, "This is your God, O Israel, that brought you out of the land of Egypt." And when Aaron saw it, he built an altar before it. And Aaron made a proclamation and said, "Tomorrow is a feast to the Lord." Then they rose early on the next day, offered burnt offerings and brought peace offerings. And the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. And the Lord said to Moses, "Go, get down, for your people, whom you have brought out of the land of Egypt, have corrupted themselves. They have turned aside quickly out of the way which I have commanded. They have made for themselves a molded calf and worshipped it and sacrificed to it, and said, 'This is your God, O Israel, that brought you out of the land of Egypt.' And the Lord said to Moses, 'I have seen this people, and indeed it is a stiff-necked people.'" And at that point, God is ready to say, all done. He's ready to just wipe them off of the face of the earth, which he could have, and yet he didn't. He allowed them to wander in the wilderness for 40 years. He never gave up on this group of people. And had Moses lead them to the point until he died, Joshua took over, and somewhere right around here, millions of people, Israelites, crossed this Jordan River into this land of Israel, all because of this. God never gave up on them. No matter how far that they wandered away from him, he just never gave up on them. And he could have wiped them off the face of the earth, and yet he didn't. And we see that today because the land of Israel is still here amidst this worldwide tension. The fact that millions of Jews have now moved back into the land, that Jesus came from this people group, shows us God's amazing mercy and love and compassion on this group of people that he set his love on. And that is what we're going to learn in our parable today. A child who walks away and the compassion of a father when he returns. And this parable is a reminder to all of us that it is never ever too late to come back to Jesus, no matter how far you've ever wandered away. So here's our parable, Luke 15:11. Jesus continued, "There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, 'Father, give me my share of the estate.' So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in the whole country. He began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country who sent him to his field to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, 'How many of my father's hired men have food to spare? And here I am starving to death. I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired men.' So he got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him and ran to his son, threw his arms around him and kissed him. And the son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his servants, 'Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate, for this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' So they began to celebrate. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came near to the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked him what was going on. 'Your brother's come home, and your father has killed the fattened calf, because he has him back safe and sound.' The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But as he answered his father and said, 'Look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who squandered your property with prostitutes, came home, you killed a fattened calf for him.' My son, the father said, you are always with me and everything I have is yours. But we have to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is now found. And standing here on the Jordan River where he loved the Israelites enough to watch them come across here to go into the land reminds us of God's love for us no matter how far we walk away from him. Okay. Here's the moral of that parable. There you go. Kids are brats, okay? So, and I was going to say, kids are brats, let's pray and go home, okay? And then most of you get that. There were three preachers in Barney's coffee shop one day discussing this whole idea of when does life actually begin? So they gave each other opinion. The first preacher said, life begins when a child takes his or her first breath. The second preacher says, no, that's not true. Life begins when a child is conceived. And the third pastor said, nope, you guys both have it wrong. Life begins when the last child leaves home and the dog dies. Okay. Perfect. That's when life begins, okay? Here's the deal with children. We have 7 of them, and I can tell you every single one of them are completely different. Some of our kids grew up like the older brother, completely compliant. Anything we said, they're like, absolutely, we're just going to trust you and Dad. They loved wisdom. That was the way it was. But then there were those other ones that some of you probably have too. And we would say the same thing to them, and yet they would go do their own thing. That was their deal. I'm out of here, don't want to listen to Mom and Dad. I'm moving away. And we just would say to them, we're just trying to save you from heartache. But they didn't want to listen, and we realized apparently they had to go and learn these things for themselves. Most of you, if you have kids that aren't that age right now, all I can encourage you is this, just wait, okay? Because this is what's going to happen. That's just what kids do. Someone wrote this, seriously, like made me laugh. They were talking about teenagers and how difficult it is to have teenagers. So someone writes this, Jesus talked about this, they said. Matthew 15. Leaving that place, Jesus withdrew to the region of Tyre and Sidon. A Canaanite woman came from the vicinity. She cried out, Lord, Son of David, have mercy on me. My daughter is suffering terribly from demon possession. But Jesus did not answer a word. And she wrote in here and she says, the reason why Jesus probably didn't answer is because he was thinking, no, lady, your child is not demon possessed. She's just now a teenager. Because here's why. Demon possession and adolescence look a lot alike. So if you ever wonder that, like that's what's going on with your kid. But a lot of you here, you're like, my precious little Bubba would never treat me like that. Well, just put that on your refrigerator. Okay, that's what you need to do. But here's the point today, is that no matter what your kids ever do to you, like it's amazing how much you love them. It's amazing that if they have hurt you, your love for them kind of overrides the hurt. It just does. It helps you forget the past. I don't know what it is. It's just something to do with kids. Your greatest concern is always for them to make good decisions, but a lot of times they really just don't, just like we saw in the prodigal son right now, the younger son. So I realize this, that sometimes I think God allows children to go off the rails. And I think he does it because he wants them to have their own personal faith in him. And he's going to use those times to show them what he's like and what it means to come back to him because he's very gracious and merciful. But for Jesus, he taught this crowd of people, and I think the reason why he did this parable is because he wanted you and I, of course, thousands of years later, but this particular people group, to really understand the heart of God. Because we just saw it in the video, the patience he had for the Israelites was amazing. And the reason why is because he considered the Israelites his children. And if you are a follower of Jesus, then you would be considered a child of God just like that. Now, for some of you, you may need to hear that today. For some of you, it may be your first day back to Bible study. It may be the first time you picked up your Bible this morning. It may be the first time you went back to church on Sunday. And honestly, you just kind of don't know what to do. Because in your mind, you're like, it's been so long and so much has happened. And this could have been your story. For you, maybe you were like, grew up in the church and you were taught about dating and you knew you were not supposed to be unequally yoked, but then you saw that really super hot guy. And you're like, well, of course we're going to date, but I can save him. And then because he wasn't a Christian, he talked you into sex, and then you got pregnant, and then there was a fast wedding, and now you have a non-believing husband and a baby, and you kind of feel stuck. And at that point, you don't know what to do, but you stop going to church. But then one day, many, many years later, you wake up and you say, you know what? I can't do this anymore. I want Jesus back in my life. So you bring it up to your husband. He laughs at you and says he's never going to go with you. But you know you need to do something because you have missed your relationship with God. But you might be a lot like the prodigal son today. That you're afraid that God's not going to accept you back. You're afraid that God is mad at you, and you're really not even sure what to do. And if that's your story, then today this parable is meant directly for you. Because what you need to know is this: he's waiting. He really is, just like he always waited for the Israelites. He's always been waiting with outstretched arms for you to run back to him. And he'll embrace you back, and you need to know that because his mercies are new every day. So I want to unpack this story a little bit because some of you are feeling like not so much that you are coming back today like the prodigal son, but you're kind of going on the other side of the prodigal son, like when he first started. Like, I just want to get out of here. I'm just tired of my marriage. I'm tired of my kids. I'm tired of my job. I'm tired of the responsibilities. So you, like the prodigal son, are about ready to walk away from everything. And it's not like you have asked for your inheritance yet, but you're kind of thinking about it. You just kind of want to spread your wings and get out of here. But Wayne Cordero, in his book Divine Mentor, he makes a great point about the prodigal son and you and me. And he said this. He said, there's two very different instructors or teachers in life. One, we're going to call this wisdom. Okay? Wisdom is a teacher in your life. Wisdom is awesome because wisdom teaches you learn what not to do before you do it so you don't ruin your life. And that's a teacher. You're learning what, okay, if I marry that non-Christian guy, wisdom says that it's not going to be a good deal, so I need to run ahead of time. See how that works? The other teacher is this: consequences. Okay? So we have wisdom or we have consequences, and those are our two teachers or instructors in life. Consequences are this. You learn, this is the first one, you learn what not to do before you do it so you don't ruin your life. That's wisdom. Here's consequences you learn after you've done what you shouldn't have done, and now your life is kind of ruined. And they're both teachers, and we can learn both from each one of them. The problem is consequences are by far the tougher of the two. Because consequences always have like a back-end price. And a lot of times when the back-end price to this, what it's going to cost you, could be your marriage, your family, your reputation, your job, or your ministry. Now, for those of you that, we saw this in the news this week, that's why I'm bringing it up. For those of you that know John Crist, he's the comedian, the Christian comedian. We've played his videos a billion times in here before it starts because he's super uber funny. We saw him in like comedian concert last year, and he's just one of those funny guys. But this week it came out and about how for the last 7 years he's been living in unbelievable sin, and he's been doing things that he absolutely should not be doing with women, and it just came pouring out, and he just lost everything. He canceled all of his shows, his career's done, his ministry's done, his reputation is done, everything's done. And it so makes me sad because he had the option to let wisdom teach him. To say, hey, John, if you're dealing and struggling with women, you need to get some guys around you to be accountable to. You need to get some help ahead of time so you don't blow up your life. And he's living right now on the other end. But here's the deal with wisdom. Wisdom also costs you something. And what wisdom costs you is your time. You need to open the Bible and find out what God says about the things you're about ready to do. Wisdom costs you learning, understanding what sin is, obeying what God says before you're about ready to do something you shouldn't do. Wisdom teaches you the lesson before you hurt yourself. Consequences teach you the lesson after you hurt yourself. See what I'm saying? It's so simple. It's like, wisdom or consequences? One or the other is going to run your life and teach you, and life's too short to have consequences do that. Wisdom puts up a fence at the top of the cliff so you don't fall over. Consequences visits you in the hospital when you're in traction from falling over the cliff. That's just how this whole thing plays out. Proverbs tells us this: a prudent person foresees danger and takes precaution. Oh, I think I'm attracted to that guy who's not my husband. You better run. Oh, I think I want to leave my kids for, you better run. Like you got to get it ahead. You look for things and then you run. That's pretty much what the Bible says on that. The simpleton goes blindly on and suffers the consequences. So if you're thinking right now of being the younger son, my heart is to tell you a warning that wisdom says you need to follow wisdom and not, because there's huge consequences. And here's the thing, there's not only consequences for you, but I look at John Chris' family, the people that are so devastated by what he did. His dad's a pastor, his family, his friends, all these people that have entrusted him. And it doesn't affect just yourself. And we saw that in the prodigal son. It didn't affect just him. It affected his dad, his family, his brother, everyone when he left home. So what I want to do is I want to share a story about a girl named Jenny. I'm going to flip-flop between Jenny and the prodigal son. Jenny grew up in Phoenix. In her early teenage years, she fell into a long pattern of anger towards her parents and frustration with them. They didn't react very well when she came home with a nose ring. They couldn't stand her friends. She would go out all night and never tell them where she was. Like she was kind of the problem child. One night, Jenny and her mom and dad had a really big fight. She screamed at her parents and she said, "I hate you." And she slammed the door. And that night, she acted on something that was forming in her mind for many, many years. When everyone was asleep, she went and she got dressed. She packed a bag and she went into the kitchen. She opened the kitchen drawer. She found her parents' credit cards, cash. She found the bank book of her family's banking information. She called an Uber very, very early in the morning. She headed to the airport because she was going to fly to New York City. Her life was going to change. She wanted to be away from her parents. She wanted to be away from the church that she, of course, hated to go to anyway. But before she got to the airport, she had the driver take her to the bank. At the bank, she forged her mom's signature. She withdrew $15,000 out of her parents' investment account that was to pay for her sister's school. She forged her, and she gets to the airport. She uses her dad's credit card. She got a ticket to LaGuardia, and she figured that was the last place her parents would ever look for her. As she arrived in New York, she started enjoying her life, new group of friends, plenty of booze, late nights, all day, no school, no parents hassling her about her nose ring or who she was having sex with or what drugs she was doing. But it doesn't take long for the $15,000 she stole to be gone, and the credit cards have now been canceled. Back home, her family is frantic. They're trying now to figure out what to do. We've got to get to pay these credit cards off. They don't have enough money to do that. How are we going to pay for our other daughter's college? Like there's all these repercussions from what the prodigal child just goes off to do. Meanwhile, back in New York, things aren't going very well for Jenny. She's soon addicted to heroin. The money that she stole is nowhere to be found, so she moves into a squat, starts selling herself with sex so that she can afford her drug habit. One day she walks down the street and she sees a poster on a telephone pole, and it says, "Have you seen this girl?" And right below is a picture of her. And it was a picture of her, what she used to look like, not the one she looks like today. The poster had her parents' phone number on it. She ripped down the poster and stuck it in the back of her pocket. But months passed and years passed. And Jenny was careless one too many times, and she started getting very, very sick. She went to a free clinic to discover now she had hepatitis C and HIV. And at this point, not even the brothel where she was selling herself for drug money would want her. She sat lonely, tired, and hungry in the squat. She looked at the poster where she'd rescued from the telephone pole, and she just stared at it. So we'll stop for her story for a second, and we'll say this. How do you know you're getting ready to walk away like Jenny did, like the young prodigal son did? How do we know that? And we start here. Recognize our selfishness. Luke 15:11, Jesus said there was a man who had 2 sons. The younger said to his father, "Give me my share of the estate." So he divided it between the two. Here's the deal. When you start thinking, me, my, this isn't fair, I deserve more, I deserve things now, I deserve better than this, I don't have to put up with this anymore, I'm going to take control of my own life, nobody's going to tell me what to do. In there, you start looking at that word, I, and you realize, wait a minute, maybe I have my eyes on me instead of where they should be. And if you're feeling that way, you need to stop and let wisdom be your instructor. Because those thoughts will take you farther than you'll ever want to go. And those thoughts are what starts family breakups and divorces and pink slips and heartaches. So I always say, recognize it at the beginning. Seek wisdom. Get help. If your marriage is in trouble, go get counseling. Go figure it out. Don't just run away from the whole situation. And then I always say this, be totally honest with God. Say, God, I hate my life. I hate my husband. I hate my kids. I hate everything about my life except possibly my dog. Okay, that's where most people are. But we have to get to the point where we're looking at God and not our own circumstances. The second way we know we're getting ready to go down this path is this. Recognize we don't want to be accountable to anyone. Verse 13 says this, not long after the young son got together, he set off what? For a distant country. Why? Because in a distant country, no one knew him. So when you are getting ready to become a prodigal son, most of it's because you're going to get away from the people that you're accountable to around you. The younger son didn't take his money and hang out at home. He didn't, get the money and hang out at church. He left and set out for a distant country where he didn't have to be accountable to his dad, his brother, his church, his youth pastor, none of those things. Because when you get ready to pull a prodigal son season, this will be your warning, you're not going to want to go to church. The church people are going to call and you're going to be like, oh, I'm busy, I can't do that. And you're just going to be away from everybody else. Because they're going to want to try to talk some sense into you and you don't really want to hear it. Here's the third one. Recognize we're thinking short term. The prodigal son was thinking short term. Look at what he says. Not long after the young son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, but he squandered it. He didn't save it. He didn't put it in an investment account to earn interest to live the rest of his life. He was thinking very, very short term. And a lot of people do that. They're like, my marriage sucks right now, so I'm going to get a divorce now, without thinking what the repercussions in the future. I hate my job. Well, you got a good job. Maybe you just work it out and you don't just walk away and don't do the whole prodigal thing. See, most people get that way with life, and they think of today and they don't think of what today has effects for the future. I think about that with my marriage with Rob. For the first 10 years, most of you know this, I didn't like him at all. And I prayed that God would give me any reason to leave him. I begged God, please let me leave him. Give me a reason why I can't. I was very, very miserable. And I look back now, we just had our 40-year anniversary. And I think to myself, you know what? I would not be doing what I'm doing up here if I had left him. I would be a whole different person, a whole different life. What it would have done with the kids, we would never even had Cheyenne and Dusty. There's lots of things that say, you know what? Don't let short-term thinking win out. And for some of you, I'm not trying to make anyone feel bad, because some of you, that option did win out, and some of you, you left your husband, or you left your job, or you left your kids. So today's not to beat anyone up for anything like that. That's not the point here. It's to remind you how God feels about you. And if you have left and you're thinking, because I left my husband or I got a divorce, that God doesn't want me, that's not true. God is trying to tell you with this prodigal son story that God really does love you. And he really wants you back home. And he's such a great father of grace and forgiveness. Here's what happened in verse 14. After he'd spent everything, there was a severe famine in the whole country. He began to be in need, so he went out and hired himself out to the citizen of a country who sent him to his fields to feed pigs. Now, if you know anything at all about the Jewish people, Jews and pigs do not go together. It's this whole weird kosher thing. So the point is that that was his job. That was the lowest end of the low. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. But look what it says, when he came to his senses. See, some people today need to come to their senses. They need to stop and they need to say, you know what? I don't know why I did what I did, but I need to go home. He said when he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired men have food to spare? And here I am starving to death. I'm going to go out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. Back to Jenny. Jenny sees the poster that she had ripped down, and she started thinking back when she was a child of 12, and they had that big water fight that they laughed, and she remembered hugging her sister when her boyfriend David broke up with her. She remembered the moments where they danced together and they had fun, and she said, God, why in the world would I ever leave that? And she said, even our family dog lives better than I do out here in New York. So she's sobbing now, and she doesn't really know what to do, but she knows she needs to go home. She calls the phone number that's on the poster, and it goes to voicemail 3 times. The first 2 times she hangs up. The third, she leaves this message. Mom and Dad, it's me, Jenny. I'm wondering about coming home. Tomorrow night I'm going to catch a bus to Phoenix. I'll be there about midnight, and if you're not there, then I'll just continue on the bus and go to Tucson. The next day, Jenny sat on the bus and she thought, you know what, there's a lot of flaws. What if my mom and dad are out of town? What if they never got the message? I haven't seen them, called them, talked to them for 10 years. What are they going to do when they find out I'm a junkie with AIDS? Like, how are they going to even react to that? And if they do show up, I have no idea what I'm going to say. The bus pulled in at Phoenix bus station, and 10 minutes past midnight, Jenny hears the hiss of the brakes as the bus comes to a stop. Her heart's pounding, and she says, well, I'm just going to get ready for nothing. Back to the prodigal son. Here's what he did. He got up just like Jenny, and he went back to his father. Some of you, like I said, need to get out of the pig pen. It's time to stop hanging out with people that are destroying your relationship with Jesus. It's time to walk away from those friends who are promoting lifestyles that you know you shouldn't be in. You may have to walk away from a relationship that you're just like, but I love him so much, but he's not a Christian. He's not a follower of Jesus. He's going to bring you down. That's just what happens. It's wisdom. It's a warning. So please listen to it. And then please, it's time to come home. That's what's going on here. Because when you come home, this is what you're going to come home to. But while he, the son, was still a long way off, his father saw him and he was filled with compassion. He wasn't filled with anger towards his son. He wasn't filled with bitterness. He wasn't be like, boy, you're going to pay me back every penny. He wasn't, I'm going to ground you for the rest of your life. None of that. Instead, he ran to his son, he threw his arms around him and kissed him. That's the heart of God the Father. Matt Williams, Biola Talbot, says this. He says, in the first century, a Middle Eastern man never ran. If he were to run, he would have to hitch up his tunic so he would not trip. And if he did this, it would show his bare legs. In that culture, it was humiliating and shameful for a man to show his bare legs. But here's the deal. His father didn't care. Because always remember this, God is on your side. You have to get that. Some people don't understand that, but he really is. And God doesn't care what other people think about you. And here's what you need to know. If you come back in repentance and faith and give your life to Jesus and fully understand what it means to follow him, I'm going to tell you something. Your legalistic religious friends aren't going to be very happy with that. And some of you have religious parents that aren't going to be very happy with that. And some of you have religious children that aren't going to be happy. And you know why? It's what Jesus has been fighting, because it's way more fun to look down at people who are in sin and instead of uplift them and bring them back. It's way more fun to look down at them because then you think like, well, I'm so spiritual. No one wants you really to come back home because it's so much more fun to talk about you when you're in the pig pen. And yet, God says, don't listen to them. Don't listen to anything they have to say. Someone tweeted about John Chris. My son Sean loves John, and it was really, really hard for him to hear what happened. So he was on his Twitter account. I don't know how this all played out, but a girl wrote down to John, and she said, I heard you were a predator. My son wrote back and said, I heard you were judgmental. See, we need to see people that are prodigal sons or daughters with a heart of compassion and broken hearts for them. And whether it's grandkids or ex-husbands, we need to be praying for them and praying for people like John Crisk to come back to Jesus. We don't want to get all high and mighty like, oh, I'd never do that, just like we talked about last week. So for you, if you're coming back, ignore the gossip. We see how God feels about us from the movie Finding Nemo. As dumb as it sounds, as I study and I put these things together and then I have to go over them, every time I went over it, I cried every time I got to this point. But I put an extra hormone patch on, so I'm not crying today. So it's going to all work out good for all of us. Because I cry all the time. My brother, he called me and he goes, I was worried about you. You cried a lot last time I saw you. And I said, yeah, I don't know what's wrong with me. So I started telling about the Nemo story, and I started crying. And he said, why don't you just not tell the story? And I'm like, no, it's got a great point. I'll put a patch on, we'll be fine. So I feel good. Here we go. Finding Nemo, it's an animated story of a father's resolute search for his son. A father, a fish named Marlin, teams up with another fish named Dory to find Nemo. A dentist captures Nemo while diving off the coast of Sydney, Australia, placed him in his fish tank in his dentist office. But Nemo thinks his father has forgotten about him, and he thinks he'll never see his dad again. But one day, a pelican named Nigel lands in the window of the dentist's office to tell Nemo an amazing story. He said, Nemo, your father's been fighting the entire ocean looking for you. Nemo says, my dad did that? He said, yeah, he's been battling sharks and jellyfish, Nigel says. Nemo says, it's my dad, he took on a shark. Nigel says, he actually took on 3. Nemo's dumbfounded and he says, Dad took on 3 sharks for me? Nigel explains, you see, kid, after you were taken, your dad started swimming like a maniac. He took on 3 sharks, he battled an entire fish forest, and now he's riding a bunch of sea turtles on the East Australian current, and the word is he's headed right here to find you. See, when the prodigal son realizes that he has a great daddy, because that's what Nemo said, he says, what a great daddy that I have. You and I have a great daddy. And if you're a prodigal son or daughter and you're like, you have a great daddy and you need to know that going into this. He realizes this, the prodigal son in this. The son said to him, Father, basically, I get that you're a great daddy, but I have sinned against heaven and against you, and I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, quick, bring the best robe, put it on him, put a ring on his finger, sandals on his feet, bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate, for the son of mine was dead and is alive again, and he was lost and is now found. So they began to celebrate. Meanwhile, we read that the older son, I don't think we have enough time to deal with this, the older son comes into the field and he's all angry and whatever because of it. And that's when we talked about earlier that some people, if they're very religious, they're not going to be very happy at your return, which is what the older brother is all about. But I want to go to verse 32. And I want to say this. Let's forget that. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is now found. That's a big deal. Jenny steps out of the train. She's not knowing what to expect, but she looks to her right and she sees an empty platform. But before she can look to the left, she hears someone call her name. Her head turns around and there's her mom and her dad and her sister and aunts and uncles and cousins and grandmother, and they're holding a big sign that says, "Welcome home, Jenny." And everyone is crying and wearing party hats. And there's her mom and dad running towards her, tears streaming down their face, arms held wide. Jenny can't move. Her parents grab her with such force, and she said, "Dad, I am so sorry." And he said, I know you are, but I want you to forget the apologies. All we care about is the fact that you are home. And Jenny finds herself in a sea of family and love she has not known for over 10 years.
You ever get tired of your just boring day-to-day life? I do. I should say I did. Then I decided to do something about it. Conventional wisdom says you live your life, you grow up, Your parents die, they leave an inheritance for you. That wasn't working for me. I wanted to enjoy that inheritance now, so I decided to do something about it. So one day, I walked straight up to my dad, looked him square in the eye, and I said,
Dad, I want what's coming to me right now. That's what my youngest son said to me. At that moment, all I could think of was, I'd like to give what's coming to him right now. But he's my son, and I love him. And as much as it put an ache in my heart, I gave him the money, and I told him that he could go search for a life on his own. Not long after that, he packed his bags, and the next thing I knew,
I was out of there. The friends, the food, the clothes, it was great. Until
my son's money ran out around the same time the country hit a recession.
it was bad. Really bad. I'd squandered everything my dad had given me, and I didn't have anywhere to live, anything to eat. So it was hunger pains, a constant reminder of how I'd squandered my life away. I lived in agony day after day.
After day after day, I would watch and I would wait. And my heart would ache, as only a heart can, from a parent to a child. But hear me on this. I never once gave up on my child. I knew that he would come back one day.
One day it hit me. I realized my dad's lowliest worker was living like a king compared to me. So I had an idea. See, I would go up to him and I would humbly just ask him for a job. I couldn't expect him to take me back as his son, but maybe he would give me a job, just maybe.
It was a beautiful day. I was sitting there on the porch, just enjoying the cool breeze, and that's when I saw him.
He stood up. He looked in my direction, and he squinted his eyes to kind of get a better look at me. Wondered if he would take me back. And then my dad jumped off the porch.
You know what I did next? I ran.
I'd never seen him run so fast. He was like this kid who was excited about something, and then I realized he was excited about me.
My heart was pounding so fast, I just had to get to him.
He was running at me with his arms stretched out as if to say, "Welcome home."
Welcome home! Welcome home! And as I got closer to him, I could see tears in his eyes.
My dad was crying.
Tears of joy. And you know what my boy did next? He jumped.
I couldn't help it. I jumped right into my dad's arms, and you know what he did?
Well, I fell backwards. He's a big boy.
He held me. He held me like only a father could. I just kept saying to him over and over again, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't deserve to be called your son."
My son is home. Get him some clean clothes. Get him some shoes for his feet. Let's prepare a meal. No. Let's prepare a feast. For my son will no longer live as an orphan. Today we will celebrate, for all my hopes have come true.
I guess it was hope. Hope that kept me going all those days. Hope that my father would show me mercy. Hope that somehow he would take me back and that I could be forgiven.
Forgiven. It is all forgiven. It is forgotten, and I will never bring it up again. There is no anger, there is no shame, there is no blame. All that's left is just pure joy. For my child was lost, and now he's found.
Do not come back to God because you're afraid of what he thinks of you. Because as we've seen in this parable, he is waiting there for your return with open arms. Father, thank you for this lesson today. Thank you for this realization of how much you love us. Thank you for this parable that Jesus taught so that we would know your love for us. God, I pray if there's anyone here today that needs to know you, that they would invite you into their life. But more than that, God, for those that are wayward, I pray that today's the day they say, I'm coming home. Because now they know that you are waiting for them with arms wide open. We pray for that. We thank you for Jesus and what he did on the cross to make all of this available. I pray for any person today that's dealing with this, that you would come alongside of them and make this easy for them. And for those of us that are trying or thinking maybe to walk away and become the prodigal, I pray that we will learn a valuable lesson. Do we want wisdom or do we want consequences? I pray, God, that we will choose the side of wisdom. In Jesus' name, amen.